All right, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Growth by Shawn podcast. So I'm here with Scarlett Stanhope. Scarlett, I didn't even ask how you pronounce your last name. I hope I didn't butcher it.
You pronounced it correctly.
Yeah. All right, beautiful. So she is the Biz Hippie, if you have not heard of her yet. But yeah, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. In fact, the Biz Hippie is typically how I write my last name on things. I'm like, screw the last name. I'm just Scarlett the Biz Hippie. That's all
All
you need
right.
to
Hey, that
know.
works. So how I start the podcast is this is an open interpretation of who you are.
Oh, wow. Okay,
All
that
right.
that is a very open interpretation. Well, I mean, it helps that I have the MO of the Biz Hippie. That's
Mm-hmm.
really who I am. And that comes from a couple of different places. I mean, looking back on my overall growth journey, I started off very much in the biz side of reality. I was all about being successful and getting straight A's. And I was the 18-year-old restaurant manager and the business management, accounting, and finance student, with my high GPA. And so everything was very success driven and money driven for me in my life. And it also caused me to get to a very, misaligned rock bottom place in my life. And that's when I did my 180 shift into total hippie reality, where I was like, now I'm going to become a yoga instructor and a life coach and a Reiki practitioner, and I'm going to run my own business, and I'm going to wear flowy pants, and I'm going to travel and do ayahuasca in the jungle, which is all things that I love.
Mm-hmm.
And I went total hippie. And so now my journey has been finding that place in the middle where I can bring my biz, my masculine, structural, successful achiever side with my hippie, flowy, feminine side, bringing that together and also sharing that with the world as well. So that's the really broad overview of who I am in a nutshell.
That works for me. So I know that you dive very deeply into the money aspect of business, and things like that. But let's start with when you were 18 versus where you are now. What did success look like then versus what does it look like now for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was very different. It was very different. My whole life, I really grew up with a lot of programming around perfectionism and achievement. And so being a straight A student, getting good grades, being a perfectionist. I actually went to boarding school for 7 years during those
Okay.
really like adolescent important years from the ages of 7 to 14. So it was really trained in me that I was constantly surrounded by authority and that I had to be perfect in the eyes of these authorities. I couldn't get in trouble. I couldn't get a detention. I couldn't, be a bad kid. And it caused me so much suffering because, on the one hand, I had all these migraines. I was really stressed because I was upholding these high levels of perfectionism. And at the same time, I was also called a goody goody and like was bullied because of that too. So it was like I couldn't win, So that's where I came from. But those patterns and tendencies continued on into my early adulthood too. So I was very close to attending culinary school, actually, instead of going and getting my degree, my bachelor's in business management, accounting, and finance. I almost pursued a whole career in culinary. I was actually accepted to the Culinary Institute of America. And 1 month before graduating high school, I decided, I was like, I can't do it. I can't go through it. And I have to become a business major because everybody says like culinary doesn't make good money and it's a waste of money to spend this much on school. And I'm so successful at everything that it would be a waste of me to go and pursue this specific thing. And I need to go and do the more quote successful route, the thing that's going to make me the most money, the thing that's going to give me the best opportunities, the thing where I can wear my business suit and be a corporate tycoon. Like that was really a huge driving factor for me, was that I had this pressure on myself to be the best that I could be through the lens of like money and corporate business. And this also reflected in my job. I started as a hostess at a restaurant because I was in the restaurant sphere, in the culinary sphere, and I went from hostess to shift supervisor to manager. And I was so driven and determined to be like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be the best at it. I'm going to do it at like a young age. And I'm just going to work so hard to get this title. And the title meant everything to me, and doing it as quick as possible to prove to myself that I was good enough. And so
Mm,
my success then as an 18-year-old was purely based on these external factors of how much money I had in my bank account, what titles I could put on my resume, what GPA score I could put on my resume, and all of those things were really the defining factors of success, and also what other people thought about me too. That was
mm,
a huge factor for my success.
mm-hmm. Um, yeah, it's interesting. Our stories are different and unique, of course, but I was the opposite, where I was the more of a bad kid in the smart classes, where I hated authority, things like that. Our restaurant experience, I have a lot of restaurant experience as well. I started as a hostess when I was in college, and then did to go, and then I did um, bartending, and that served me for many, many years. Um, and I had actually, what happened was I was working at Chili's at the time, and I had been sent to like a manager in training program to become like a key for the restaurant. And they didn't want me to go, or once I got there, they didn't like how confident I was. I was overconfident with my abilities. And I was like, all right, well, I think I'm about done here. So, but let's dive into what money is and how you defined it at a younger age and how you define it now.
Yeah, absolutely. So money, and I love to talk about this a lot because it's a huge part of a lot of the coaching that I do now, and I've uncovered so much of my own relationship to money in my own process. So money for me when I was younger was really the defining aspect of success. It was
Mhm,
the most important thing. And luckily, I did learn a lot of money skills from a young age. I did a really good job learning, okay, save money, be responsible with money. So I came from this place of having my first savings account when I was 7 years old, and learning that the most important thing for me was to grow that savings account and to be responsible with my money. And so when I first started working at this restaurant job when I was 16, I put 70% of every paycheck into my savings account. And so when I first started working and the minimum wage was like, I don't know, $7 an hour, it was like, and I was working 1 day a week, it was 70% of a $70 check that a 16-year-old made. But then as my pay increased and my hours increased and I got raises, I still continued to put 70% of every paycheck into my savings account. Also, because I was young, I didn't really have expenses except for all the many hours I spent at shopping malls with my friends. And it was this money was the score of my life. Like if I am playing this game of life and I want the winning score, then I need to have a really high amount in my savings account. And so I was just constantly trying to get more and more and more money and like hoard it in a way. And so looking back, it's something that I am really proud of and accomplished, to say like, oh, when I was 20 years old, I had 37 or yeah, $38,000 in my checking account. Like most
well,
20-year-olds can't say that that's true, but
mhm,
also it was for no reason. Like there was
mhm,
no reason that I had that money. People just asked me, what are you saving for? And I'd be like, I don't know. Like, I should be saving for something. I thought I was just supposed to do this. I guess I'm
mhm,
saving for a house because that's the next thing that I should be doing,
mm,
according to everybody. And so money was purely just this driving factor of what I should be doing, what I thought I need to be doing in order to be winning this game of life and in order to be successful,
mm.
which is very different than how it is now.
So how is it now? How would you define it now?
Yeah, absolutely. Money has really shifted. It went from for me being this hoarding and this needing it to feel successful to now money gets to be the thing that allows me to create the life that I want to live. And money is a tool that I utilize. And so
Mm,
one of the biggest things that happened in this process of shifting my beliefs and my relationship to money was taking this money that I had been saving and choosing to use it and choosing to use it towards things that were important to me. So this money really did eventually serve a purpose, and it was to fuel my early years in business and to choose to invest in things that were important to me, which included getting my yoga teacher training certification, getting 3 coaching certifications, going on several retreats all over the country and all over the world, really prioritizing what was the most important for me in my life right now. And money also continues to be a method of creation, a method of manifestation. And that's why I manage it. That's why I take care of it, because for me, money is how I prioritize what's important and how I choose to create this life that I'm currently living.
Now, how do you view saving now? Do you save money now, and is it allocated for something?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I do
Okay.
save money. And the difference between the saving that I used to do and the saving I do now is before I was just saving for the sake of saving. It was a
Mhm.
cushion to make me feel good about myself. And now I save, but I save with intention. Everything, all of my money is intentional. Every single dollar has some kind of purpose and intention. And so the money that is saved for a reason. I put money aside for my travel, for my retreats. I put money aside all year long for the holidays and for Christmas because I like to give gifts to people and I know that Christmas comes every year. I
Mhm.
put money aside all year round to get my community shared agriculture, my farm share from the local farm so that I can put down a huge deposit in the spring and then get produce for the whole entire season. And I
Mm.
plan to continue to do that in the future. So I save for it all year long so that when the time rolls around, it's easy. It's easy to spend that money because I've already decided that I'm going to do it. So those are the kinds of things that I save for.
Mhm. Now, in a broad sense, when clients start to come to you and you view their relationship with money, what does it normally look like, and what do you want to build and want their relationship to look like with money while they're working with you and after they stop working with you?
That's a great question. I'd say that for the most part, I see a lot of scarcity in people's relationships to money. And especially because the clients that I like to work with are coaches, healers, entrepreneurs, people like us who have decided to grow their business. And so they're usually in 2 camps. One is either they've taken this leap of faith and they're growing their business and they're like, oh my gosh, I don't have enough money. How am I going to pull this off? And they're stressed, and all of that stress is bleeding into their business and preventing them
Mm.
from getting sales, which is a huge factor for growing the business. And then the other camp of people that I work with are clients who are in a 9 to 5 job and they do have consistent money coming in, but they want to transition into a business and they feel like that transition is going to be impossible because if I'm not already supported by my 9 to 5 job, if I still feel like I don't have enough, how could I ever have enough in my business and be fully supported by my business? So, this theme of not enoughness runs along all of my clients, no matter where they are on this spectrum of creating a thriving business that is actually supporting them. And the
Mhm.
goal of the work that we do together is it comes back to combining this feminine and masculine, this structure and this flow in a way where they can feel fully supported by their money, where they can feel abundant in their current situation right now, and they can make decisions to get to where they want to go. That's the overarching broad picture.
Mm. Now, this scarcity and fear that people have with money, when we look at it like that and how much of not enoughness that many of us deal with, okay, and hold within ourselves, can we create a thriving business from that, like, scarcity and lack within ourselves? Like, is it possible for us to hate ourselves or hate our situation enough that we are going to change it because of the hate that we have? or does it need to flip before that begins?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I I think that both can exist,
Mhm.
honestly, because recognizing the power of transformation, I believe that in order to change anything, you need to have a spark. You know, there has to be something that sparks you into wanting to change, into wanting that transformation. So when I was at the rock bottom point in my life, I had been going about my life for years and years and, you know, kept going in this downward spiral until I hit that rock bottom. And for me, it was having to be faced with death and being like, okay, if I'm dying right now, what am I going to choose? And having to say to myself, well, I don't want to die here in this situation, in this moment, in this reality. And so I had to choose to get up and leave. And I had to choose to do something about it in that situation. And that's what started to wake me up and started to instill the change that I needed. And it was from a place of deep, deep fear. It was from a
Mm,
place of deep, deep, like dislike and being so unhappy and so afraid with where I was. So honestly, I really feel that that fear is the thing that sparks the change, because if
mm,
you felt good, then why would you change?
yeah.
And you can use that as the propeller to get the momentum going. And
Mm,
so it was really that fear that motivated me to claw my way out of a dark hole. But
mm,
then once you're out of the hole, like, the fear can only get you so far. The fear is a great motivator to push you to transformation, to push you to getting great results.
mhm,
But in order to create a really abundant life and a really thriving business that you actually love and enjoy, where you do have enough, where you do feel safe, you have to be living from and creating from and operating from that place of abundance and enoughness, because
mhm,
otherwise you're unable to create it. You know,
mhm,
I have love this model of you create the results that you're putting of the energy that you're putting in. So if fear and scarcity and lack is the thing driving your actions, then you will only get fear and scarcity and lack based results. And so I have met people who have gotten a lot of results from a fear and lack and not enoughness place. But the problem is that they're unable to recognize that they've arrived
mm,
into abundance. They're unable to recognize that they have everything they could have ever wanted because they're still operating from that fear and not enoughness place. So it really doesn't matter how much money you ever have, how much success you have in your business, or where you end up in your life. Because if you are believing that you don't have enough, then you will never have enough. And it's the core that has to change in order to actually receive the results that you have created for yourself.
mhm. Now, this fear and scarcity that many of us have, where does this come from? Okay, with most people.
Yeah, okay, this is a fun conversation. I so it comes from a couple different places. I mean, the baseline foundational level is it is instilled in our childhood. It's
Mm,
instilled from what we learn in the stories that have created who we are.
mhm,
So, as a child, we learn things from our parents, from the world around us, and that instills in us our beliefs about ourselves and our beliefs about the world. That's where, on a foundational level, the scarcity and the fear and the lack and the not enoughness comes from. And then, as a result of these beliefs that have been created, we develop processes and methods for acting in the world and functioning in the world based on these beliefs. And that's how we create our lives. And so, for an example, I was just speaking with a friend yesterday, and she was talking about how, what she really wants is a family. And what she really wants is a healthy relationship. And she wants to be a mother and she wants to have kids. But no matter how hard she tries, she's meeting these guys and it never works out. They're like not the right guy, even if they seem like it. And she just always ends up clinging and feeling really attached while also trying to stay detached. And she just ends up getting hurt and frustrated over and over and over again. And I had this conversation with her and I said, well, we got to a place to recognize that this was instilled from her childhood and her own fears of abandonment and rejection that she learned from her relationship to her father in this specific example. And as a result, she is still operating and creating those same exact results in her life. Because if you believe that everybody you love is going to abandon you, that you're not worthy of receiving love, then you will never receive the love because you
Hmm.
don't allow yourself to receive it. And even if it was the perfect guy, even if the perfect guy came into your life, you would find a way to cast him aside. You would see things that you thought were scary, that were bad, that were red flags, and you would find a way to reject him. You would be operating from your own place of fear and not enoughness, and eventually he would leave you because he just can't figure out what you actually want to be happy. And it's not until you dig deep into, first of all, the stories and the beliefs, but
Hmm.
also the way, the process at which you're creating the continued story, the continued process and belief that is creating your current results.
Mm. Now, let's say that we had someone that was a little bit younger, okay, that's listening to this. Let's say it wasn't an adult or a lot of people in the enlifted community that listen to things like this and understand story work and all of these patterns and um, how things stem from childhood. Let's say we had a 16-year-old that was listening to this that still felt those thoughts of fear and abandonment. Is it I wanna use the word safe, but I don't wanna use the word safe at the same time, to look inward a little bit more at their own stories when they're that young and look to start to change some of those stories or figure out why some of these things and beliefs, are wired the way they are at such a young age.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in my opinion, I say the younger you start, the better
Mm,
because you are creating your life.
yeah.
It doesn't matter how young you are
Mm,
creating your life. And the younger that you start to create consciously and choose to create the life you want to create, then the better off you're going to be. And
mm,
honestly, I know that that's one of the reasons that I am where I am today is because even though I had my dark night of the soul at 18 and I have so much of my own stories and beliefs and patterns and scarcities that I have still been working through. When I was 8 years old, my mom started her personal growth journey. And I remember on my long 3 hour drives to Vermont and back to my boarding school, listening to Bill Harris tapes in the car. And Bill Harris is this amazing coach who is passed on now, and he has created programs that were really powerful and transformational. And I remember just listening subconsciously in the background as an 8 year old. And there was a few
mm,
key things that really, really stood out to me. One of them being you create what you focus on. So
mhm,
focus on what you want. If you keep thinking like, oh, I don't want to suffer, I don't want to be unhappy, I don't want to trip and fall and spill this beer over this customer, like that's exactly what you're going to create if you're
mhm,
focusing on what you don't want. And so instead, always be focusing on what it is you do want. And so I'm so grateful that 8 year old Scarlett received that message because even though I still had a lot of other stuff to work on and overcome, having that growth mindset, having that future looking mindset and that skill set from a young age really became a catalyst for me to make the transformation that I needed to make. And
mm,
instead, I could have wasted so many years saying so trapped where I was. So I always say the younger, the better. It is never too early to start.
Mm. Now, to transition a little bit here, when people don't have a lot of money, how can they start to build a better relationship? Or I shouldn't say how can people start to manage their money better when they have very little?
Yeah, and that's a really good question because part of the work that I do in the money-based coaching with my clients, the Empowered Abundance program, where I do more money-based work, part of it is learning how to manage your money. And so this is the process that I call blueprinting. Now,
Mhm.
when you think of managing your money, you think, oh, I got a budget. I don't want a budget. I don't want someone telling me what I can and can't spend my money on. It feels restricting. It feels limiting. So, blueprinting is a process of managing your money, but managing it in a way where you're not limiting and restricting yourself. You're just bringing awareness and consciousness to what's happening with your money and where it's going and where you're spending it instead of, limiting yourself and saying, this is what I can't do, all the things I can't do with my money. What are all the things I can do with the money that I have? And that's the thing is no matter how much money you have some amount of money coming in. And with that amount of money, you are choosing to do things with it. Maybe you're choosing responsible things like paying your rent and paying your bills and buying groceries. Or maybe you're choosing less responsible things and more you're choosing pleasure and fun and entertainment. Whatever it is you're choosing something. And so, in order to develop a better relationship with your money, in order to cultivate abundance and start practicing it, is to start managing your money, is
Mm,
to get it on paper and get clear about how much money you do have, exactly where it's going, and what is happening with it, and making conscious decisions with it. And I have found that it's good to do this when you have little money, and it's good to do it when you have a lot of money. Because I've
mm,
met people where they're like, "Oh, I don't have that much money, so why do I have to manage it?" And I've met people that say, I have so much money. Why do I need to manage it?
mm,
No one wants to manage it.
mhm,
But when you do, you have so much power and control over your money and also over your life because getting your money on paper means getting your life on paper.
mhm. A lot of these concepts I find, um, I don't know if you've read the book Think and Grow Rich
Hmm.
from, I don't know the author off the top of my
Napoleon
head.
Hill.
Oh, is it Napoleon Hill from Think and Grow
Is it?
Rich? I don't think so.
No?
No, I think it's like Summit, something, but it's irrelevant. People can look it up if they so please.
People know the
Uh,
book. You know what we're
yeah,
talking about.
people know the book. Um, from there, I want to transition again to why do we feel as a society that our worth is tied to the amount of money that we have?
Mm, yeah, I mean, that is a really good question. And I feel that a big part of it has to do with freedom.
Hmm.
All of us really have a desire to be free and a desire to live a really free life. That's what a lot of people who are entrepreneurs and coaches are aspiring to do. They're
Hmm.
aspiring to say, I'm going to break this mold and I'm going to choose what I want because that is what a free life looks like for me.
Hmm.
And so I've found that our society is caught in this trap of needing to be secure and stable and safe, which
Hmm.
is so important, but also have this desire to be free at the same time. And this is kind of where money lives, is right in the middle, because money is the thing that keeps us safe and secure and stable because we're paying for our rent, we're paying for our basic needs, but it's also the thing that fuels our freedom as well. And so there's this gray area between this stability and security and this freedom where I found that they're on opposite ends of the spectrum. where people feel like I can only have my safety or I can only have my freedom, but I can't have
Mm,
both. But I really believe that there's an in between where you can have both, where you can be safe and secure and stable and find your freedom as well. And I know that money is the method through which you can create that.
mhm. Now, how do you view, I ramble on a lot of different things just because I want to soak up and get all of my questions in that I want to learn about. So, how do you view credit cards?
So, okay, I do have an opinion about credit cards.
Okay.
So, credit cards can be a trap.
Mm-hmm.
They can totally be a trap, and they can also be incredibly beneficial as well.
Mm,
So, it depends on where you are at in your financial journey. So, if you're someone that has a lot of credit card debt and you're using credit cards to really fuel everything, you are trapping yourself because
mm-hmm.
eventually you will get to a place where it is incredibly challenging to actually pay off the credit cards because of the interest rates, and it really can be draining you dry and sucking the life out of you for the
Mm,
most part. So it can be really dangerous to utilize credit cards. On the other hand, if you have a solid foundation that you're operating off of, credit cards can be really beneficial. So I have been using credit cards for years. I've had credit cards for probably a decade at this point now, a little less than a decade.
mm-hmm.
And and yet I have zero debt.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference. Is if you can utilize your credit cards as a tool to put things on your credit cards, which is nice because it delays your payments a little bit. You can plan when you're going to pay what, and you're gathering points and cash back on things. So that's extra money in your pocket, but doing it in a way where you're able to pay it off.
Mm,
So you're not acquiring this debt and you're not ever spending any extra money on interest. Like, I do not want to be wasting money on interest. And so if you have a solid foundation that you're working off of, if you've eliminated all of your debt, if you have a solid emergency fund so you're protected in case anything goes wrong, then credit cards can be a tool where you are gaining the extra points, you're gaining the extra cash back, but you're doing it from a responsible place where are not digging yourself a hole and wasting a bunch of extra money on interest. That's
mm-hmm.
the method that I use credit cards. I am also aware that there are other methods to use credit cards in a really strategic way, which I've talked with a friend about, and she is very familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I am not an expert in that area, and I don't feel comfortable talking on it because I don't know the
Understand.
full skill set, but I know that there are more methods and skill sets for utilizing credit cards in a really strategic way. But every method, whichever stage you're at, it comes down to, can you do it in a strategic and responsible way? And
Mm,
most 99% of people are not using their credit cards strategically. It's just that, oh, well, I'm going to buy this and I'm acquiring tons of debt. And that is
mm-hmm.
just draining you at that
Mm-hmm.
point.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of different things about credit cards, to piggyback off of your point with your friend as well, where people use credit cards and they don't pay them or something. I'm not well versed at all, so it's not something we can really like chat about. And I mean, this isn't advice either way, but yeah, it's very interesting. So, how what are some of the best strategies that you use to begin to pay off of the credit card debt that people have?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, the first thing is you have to have a financial blueprint in
Hmm.
order to successfully pay off credit card debt. And here's the reason why is because if you don't have a financial blueprint, you really don't know how much money you have because you have a certain amount of money coming in every month and you have a certain amount of money going out every month towards everything, right? Bills, groceries, anything and everything. You have money going out. in order to pay off your credit card, you need to find the money to go and pay off the credit card.
Mm,
And if you don't have those numbers, then it's really just an abstract concept. And so people will be like, ah, okay, sure, I will put $300 down towards this credit card because I looked at my bank account and I had enough based off of some number that makes me feel safe to do it. But it's
mhm,
really an abstract concept. But when you have your money down on paper, you can see, okay, I have $5,000 coming in, I have $3,000 going out. So this extra $2,000, I'm going to put that towards my credit cards. So the first step is you have to have your numbers down on paper because then you know exactly how much extra you have available to put towards your goals. And so one of the goals could be paying off your credit cards, but a goal could also be saving for a down payment for a house. It could be saving for something else important. It could be putting money towards retirement. The goal could be a different thing, but you need the blueprint, you need the money down on paper so that you know exactly how much you have to put it towards that goal. And then in addition to that, once you have the reality of the situation on paper, you have the blueprint, you know the numbers, you know how much you can put towards the credit cards. I like to use the debt snowball method, which I learned from Dave Ramsey.
mhm,
And that is starting with the credit card that has the lowest balance and
mm,
putting all of your extra money towards that lowest balanced credit card. So then when it is paid off, now instead of that extra amount that you were putting towards minimum payments each month, now you take all of that money, the minimum payment amount, and the extra money you were putting towards it, and that all goes towards the next lowest credit card. And that's where the snowball comes in, is because over time you're able to give more and more because you're cutting out these minimum payments that you've
mm,
been paying, and that can all go towards paying off the credit cards. I actually have a client that I did Empowered Abundance with, I believe maybe 2 years ago at this point, and she started with tons and tons and tons of debt, and this year, very soon this year, she is this close to paying off all of it, and I'm so proud of her because thousands and thousands of dollars have gone towards paying off the credit cards. And now, once they are paid off, now she's going to have thousands and thousands of dollars extra each
mhm,
month that can go towards the other things in her life that are important instead of going towards paying off this debt.
mhm. So when people are putting themselves in debt, does that have a lot to do with just the relationship of that they have with money? Like, do you think it's good to go into debt at times, depending on what the debt is, or is there no such thing as good debt in a sense? What's your take on where debt lands?
Yeah. It's a really good question because I really have experienced both sides of the spectrum. Because on the one hand, that you can have a negative relationship with debt and you can just be someone that swipes and puts everything on a credit card. On the other hand, I have been managing my money for years, and there have been times in my business where I was really, really struggling financially. I wasn't bringing in money, I didn't have any other sources of income. And yet, I really, really wanted something. And I
Mm,
felt like it was the next step for me. And it was one of those leaps of faith moments,
mhm,
right? And there's this torn feeling between, do I do this? Do I take this leap of faith? Do I break my own code of ethics with myself of not wanting to have credit card debt and take this risk and do it? And sometimes it's hard decisions, but in some cases I did do it. And I said, you know
mhm,
what, I am going to put this huge payment on a credit card and I don't know how it's going to go and I don't know how it's going to work out. But I also believe that you can be as responsible as you can be. Like I made those decisions and I made those decisions having all of the facts and being like, okay, this is exactly how much money I have. This is exactly how much money I do need to make this happen. And so it wasn't just blind swiping and
mm,
having no concept of what is actually happening with my financial reality. So I think there can be a balance of taking that leap of faith, but doing it in the most responsible way possible. I really believe that if you are in control of your money, you tend to bring in so much more abundance than you expect. And it's so much easier to avoid going into major debt. Sometimes the leaps of faith are worth it, but it's also going to be so much easier for you to pay off that debt if you're already operating from a responsible place. There was times
Mm,
where I put a big payment on a credit card and I was like, I don't know how it's going to go. But then in the next couple of months, things really changed and I was able to pay it off like instantly because
mhm,
I knew what was happening with my money.
mhm. Now, during those leap of faith moments, was there ever a leap of faith moment that you took and spent that large amount of money and it didn't work out?
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. So in my earlier on in my business, I was doing a lot of exploring and self-discovery. I was basically saying yes to everything that lit me up. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, I'm going to get my yoga teacher training. Yes, I'm going to become a Reiki practitioner. Yes, I'm going to go travel to Montana and Sedona and Hawaii. And like, yes, and like I said at the beginning, I had a large savings account cushion.
Hmm.
So it was like pandemic, no money coming in, just starting my business, spending thousands and thousands of dollars out of my
Mm,
savings account to fuel my life and then also invest in these other things. So it was a really interesting time. And meanwhile, I like wasn't making money in my business. And so at one point I hired a coach. I worked with a business coach and I hired this coach with the intention of being like, I really need money coming into my business.
mhm,
That is why I'm hiring you. So I spent a lot of money on this coach. And at the end, I wasn't making any more money in my business than I had
mm,
been before working with this coach. And I
mhm,
learned things. I learned a lot about, being really strategic and posting 5 times a week and reaching out to 50 people and doing cold calls and things like that. And I did all of the things, and yet I wasn't making the money back. And so I was really frustrated. And so, on the one hand, I can look back at this time and recognize that I learned so much, and also recognize like that really didn't serve me that
mhm,
much because
mhm,
that process doesn't resonate with me. I like doing things and discovering a process that works for me in my
mm,
method, not just following someone else's strategy personally. That's the way that I operate. Not everybody operates this way.
mhm,
And it didn't really get me any closer to where I
mhm,
wanted to go. And so
mhm,
it did feel like a waste of money. And yet I can also look at it and recognize like every time I invested in myself, even if I didn't quite come out the other side a billionaire, it was the commitment to myself that mattered.
mm,
What was I choosing to invest in? I was investing in my business. I was investing in learning what I needed to learn. I was investing in committing to my business and making this work no matter what. And so, even though I didn't get the results that I wanted, and if someone presented me with that same program now, I would say no. I know that it was one step along this stepping stone of
mm,
learning that I needed to get to where I am now.
mhm. Now, with things like that, where now you realize that they didn't resonate with you at the time, things like that, but it's of course molded you into where you are now. How did you learn more to follow and trust your gut and your instincts and figure out what really works for you? Was it just a trial and error, or is there this burning desire that you can just feel that's overwhelming for you? How do you start to follow your gut now?
Yeah, and it has definitely been a journey and a process too, and a
Mhm,
discovery of learning over time because I used to not trust myself at all. And I also could not like feel. I had no
mm,
capacity to feel things or recognize feelings.
mhm,
So it has been a journey to discover like my gut instinct and say, this is a yes. And so
Mhm.
one of those practices has been discovering like inspiration and being like, oh my gosh, yes, I want this. I feel so inspired. It feels like a yes. So I had to discover that over time, as opposed to, for example, I actually had this happen pretty recently where I was on a sales call
Mhm.
with somebody and they were selling me. And I didn't plan on being on a sales call. I just happened to end up on one, which, sometimes happens. Um, but the main focus that I was feeling and experiencing in this sales call was all of the places where I wasn't, like, oh,
Mm.
I'm not where I want to be yet at the end result goal. I'm not doing as well as I should. I've worked so hard and yet I'm not. So this sales call left me feeling such a lack and fear and not good enough, hopeless space. And that's where
Mhm.
I was in the call. And then the result was, so you're unhappy, you're unsatisfied. So buy this program and you will get what you want,
Mhm.
which in the past Scarlett would have been like, yes, you're right. This is the answer. This is going to change everything.
Mhm.
This is what I need, because I was feeling really hopeless and like desiring that spark, desiring that transformation, grasping for something, needing something else. And that's exactly the energy that I was in the past when I worked with a business coach, was a suffering, like, oh, I'm not where I want to be. Something is wrong.
Mhm.
And buying from that place does not get me the results I want. And I know that because I've done it before. And this comes back to this underlying theme of the energy, the motivation that is driving your actions also creates your results. If you're investing in yourself from a place of fear and being like, if I don't invest in this, then I'll never be successful, then it's really unlikely that you're going to get all of the abundant, incredible results that you want, because you're
Mhm.
investing in fear. You're investing in not enoughness. And so on this sales call the other day, I was feeling so bad. And I said, you know what? I really need to think about it. And the guy was
Mhm.
like, well, you got to commit now, like just bringing in that type
Mhm.
of salesy energy, like you got to commit from this place of emotion, which is true, it comes back to the spark. But I'm at a place in my life where I am not going to invest in my fear. I'm not
Mhm.
going to invest in my scarcity. And so to answer your original question of how do I know,
Mhm.
it's because I have done the deep work of self-awareness and
Mhm.
recognizing what energy, what motivation is driving my actions. And so
Mhm.
I, as much as possible, consciously choose and invest in things that feel abundant, things that feel exciting, things that feel expansive, from a place of expansiveness, from a place of excitement, from a
Mhm.
place of alignment, instead of from a place of lack and not enoughness. And that's what helps me know when to say yes, is training myself to discover what aligned yeses look like for me.
Mm. So we have a couple last questions here for you. Okay. My question is, when you lie down in bed at night, what do you think about?
What do I think about? I often think about my business,
Mm.
honestly. It is my child. I
Mhm.
spend all of my time thinking about it in some capacity.
Mhm.
That is really a big focus. I also set a lot of intentions in my sleep too. So
Mm.
I actually go through a process of setting intentions for my sleep and for my dreams to reveal to
Mm.
me important information so that I can move through where I currently am. So a
Sweet.
lot of what I think about is my business and how to move forward. And I also think a lot about my own personal growth and my personal development and my journey of healing and becoming a more transformed and better person.
Mm.
That's not just when I sleep. That's pretty much all I think about ever. Like I don't know if there's anything else besides those two things.
That's okay. No, beautiful. So our last question, the last guest on the podcast leaves a question for the next guest. So
Oh.
you actually get Mark England's question. All right.
Yes.
So I'm sure you're pumped about that.
Thanks, Mark
When
England.
when was the hardest time you've ever laughed and what was it about?
The hardest time I ever laughed and what was it about? Oh my
Mhm.
gosh. I have to think about that. There was one
Mhm.
pretty recently and I got to remember what it was. Okay. Well, I guess I know there was one recently and I can't remember this specific instant, but the one that
Mhm.
does come to mind was I was in high school
Mhm.
and I was in the culinary program in high school and I was in like the baking group for this chunk of time, and so it was me and my two friends, Jen and Kayla, and we were like a triad in high school.
Mhm.
And so we're like baking and we had this huge like ball of dough that we were making something with. I don't even remember what it was. And I just remember like hoisting up this huge ball of dough and like dumping it onto the counter. And we were just in that silly, like teenage girl mood. And we were cracking up so hard about this ball of dough. We're like, it looks like fat. Like, I don't even know why it was so funny, but we were laughing so hard for like half an hour, and there was maintenance men in the room like doing things, and they were looking at us like we were crazy. They were
Mhm.
like, what are these girls even laughing about? And it was just so ridiculous. It was such a ridiculous moment, and I know there were other good ones and I can't think of them off the top of my head right now, and I'm gonna message you about it later, Shawn, and be like,
That's
this
okay.
is it. But that's one example that comes to mind, is the fat um the fat dough in high school culinary.
Those are always the best memories of times where you laugh and it's almost not as funny when you look at it, but in that moment, for no reason, just because it's between that relationship, I could talk about my funniest moment, and it's sitting in class in college, and we were laughing about basketball, and I don't even know why, but I was on the floor. I had to leave class. Like, it's just things like that where it's just in that moment, it's just so, oh, it's amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing to be able to have that just big belly laugh where it hurts. And it's only because of that relationship that's there at that time. And it's wonderful. So
Yeah, for sure.
I were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I've had some
Yeah.
really funny ones with my mom recently
Okay.
too. Because me and
Okay.
my mom are like on the same page, and we
Yep.
like talk about our internal processes and make fun of ourselves and each other. So it definitely is the relationship that creates that, and being just in a good vibe space that
Hmm.
creates it.
Yep.
I love it.
So our last two things we're looking from you is a question for the next guest.
You could have prepared me with this. I could have been thinking about
I
this the whole
prepare no
time.
one. I prepare no one, and I think that's pretty fair. I'm treating you
Okay.
just like everyone else that comes on the podcast.
Okay. Give me a second.
It's
I
all
want
right.
it to be I want it to be good.
I know the best question ever. I put them all on flashcards, and um I won't reveal. I'll tell you after we finish recording. I'll tell you what I'm going to do with all the flashcards that I have.
I'm excited. Okay.
You're not the only one that has ever been tripped up by this. You're not. It's
It's
every
because I
single.
want it to be good.
I understand.
Okay. If you could be any inanimate object, what object would you be?
Ooh, that's good. That is good. I like that. Um, the only other thing we're looking for from you is where we can find you, chat with you, work with you, set up a call with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I am most active on Instagram. My handle is at the Biz Hippie. The Bizhippie. The is included. um, I also have a website, thebizhippie.com. spelled the same way. And I have two primary programs that I offer. Empowered Abundance is the program that does all the money and the abundance. We do the managing the money, and we also dig into that relationship with money, these stories, these patterns, these beliefs and worth of not good enoughness. And also, I am starting a new program. This is June as this podcast is recording. So this program actually starts later on in the month, June 22nd, is Aligned Abundant Life, which I am really excited about. This program is an even deeper dive into the programs, the processes that we are using to create our reality and transforming these programs and processes so that we can create and cultivate our aligned and abundant life. So those are my two primary programs, but I also, always have flexibility to chat and see whatever it is you need and whatever is a good fit for you. So always DM me, always reach out.
Beautiful. Love it. All right, Scarlett. Thank you very much, and we will see you next time.
Thank you so much, Shawn.